I'd like to say a few words about international conflict, the wars, potential wars, the warmongering, the threat of wars that often dominate the headlines. And I'd like to talk about this from an egalitarian point of view because I'm an egalitarian. So, from an egalitarian point of view, the most important fact about the world and these conflicts is this. Everywhere in the world, no matter what country or region, the vast majority of people have the same basic values and aspirations. They're the values of equality in the sense of no rich and no poor, meaning not having a very wealthy, powerful elite ruling over people, dominating and oppressing them, not having people driven into poverty so that some people can be wealthy. This is something that the vast majority of people feel, and I don't care where you go. And the other basic value is what I call mutual aid, sometimes called solidarity. It means the idea that people should help each other, that people should not be pitted against each other to make them more controllable by some oppressive, privileged ruling elite. I don't care where you go, people have these values. And I don't care where you go, you will find that ordinary people have absolutely no desire to attack people elsewhere in the world, to oppress them, to benefit at their expense, or anything like that. But what you will find, of course, is that almost everywhere in the world, ordinary people with these values are not in control. Who's in control? Some ruling elite that has very selfish values of wanting to dominate people in their own nation, and often to extend that domination to people elsewhere. That's what imperialism is all about. And these ruling elites with their governments often work very hard to persuade their own population of people that there's some good reason to go to war against other people. And this requires outright lies about the other people being evil in some way or another, or lies about how we have to go to war to kill thousands of innocent people somewhere in order to protect them from something terrible that would happen to them otherwise. So the U.S. invades Vietnam on the grounds that it's necessary to protect the freedom of the Vietnamese people, and the U.S. invades Iraq by claiming that it's necessary to prevent Saddam Hussein from killing babies in incubators and blowing up New York City with a suitcase bomb and using weapons of mass destruction to kill us all and so forth. But the governments never tell the truth to people. You know, they never say, hey, let's invade this country over there so that the rich people in our country can be even richer and more powerful at the expense of killing innocent people abroad. It never says the truth, because obviously it wouldn't be able to get the support of its population if it did that. So the point I'm making is that we need to understand that the basic conflict in the world is between all of the ordinary people of the world, no matter where they live, versus the rulers who rule over them, no matter what the country is. This means that it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever to talk about world affairs as if the actors were nations, as if there were good nations and bad nations, and as if the way to understand the world was to understand, what nation was in the camp of the good guys and what nation was in the camp of the bad guys, because every nation is an entity which is an arena of conflict between the good guys and the bad guys, between the ordinary people who live there and the bad guys who are in control of the government. So that's the way to approach the issue of international conflict. And of course, you'll never see this approach used in the mass media. The newspaper headlines are always going to be telling us about this nation did that and this other nation did this, and our nation needs to do this and our nation needs to do that. And it makes it impossible to think realistically about what's going on. Related to this is the fact that it's very difficult to know why governments do what they do, because it's always for reasons that have nothing to do with the reason that they say they're doing it. And it's often for very devious, convoluted, opportunistic reasons that have nothing to do with any basic principle that could be told to the public. It's because the government at a particular time, in a particular context, thinks that it can strengthen the power of its ruling elite by doing X instead of Y. I'll give you an example. I'm going to post some books that I think are interesting to read about this at the bottom of this YouTube. One of them, I learned that early in the conflict in Syria, Assad, the head of the president of Syria, had a whole lot of prisoners who were Islamic fundamentalist terrorists. And he knew they were terrorists, but he released them from prison, just set them free. And it turns out the reason is that he knew that they were going to commit terrorism, and he wanted that to happen so that he could then boost his image as a fighter against terrorist attacks on civilians. So you have Assad releasing people that because he wants them to attack his own people, and this is the kind of Byzantine logic that motivates these ruling elites. Another very important thing is to understand the need of these elites to create enemies so that they can use the enemy as a justification for claiming to be fighting the enemy. They can then use that as a justification for doing whatever else they want to do. The United States, after the Cold War, decided to use the Muslim Brotherhood and Islamic fundamentalists as an enemy, to promote them, to pay them, to create them, to make them an enemy that could be manipulated to do things that would give the United States an excuse for attacking people when it felt that it was to the interests of the American plutocracy to attack them. And we're living in a world now where our ruling elites are creating enemies in order to whip up the population to support attacking them. I'm also going to post an article of mine where I cite overwhelming evidence that throughout the entire Cold War, from the beginning of the Russian Revolution in 1917, straight through the Korean War and the Vietnam War, the United States upper class armed the Soviet Union big time. At the same time, sending soldiers to fight in Vietnam, where the Vietnamese were being supplied with weapons by the Soviet Union. This is how these elites operate. They needed the Soviet Union to be a credible enemy to justify the entire military-industrial complex taxing the American public, to put money into the pockets of the weapons manufacturers, and to get the public to go along with it. You can't do that if there's not a credible enemy. The Israeli billionaires, who are the ruling class of Israel, they need a boogeyman enemy, and that's why they carry out ethnic cleansing against the Palestinians, to make the Palestinians a credible enemy, so that they can get the ordinary Jews in Israel to be so frightened of Palestinians that they will obey the billionaires and the politicians and generals who are beholden to them in Israel, who are driving ordinary Israelis down horribly economically. But when they rise up to demonstrate against that oppression, as they did in huge numbers in 2011, Netanyahu uses the boogeyman enemy to get them to stop rising up. He created an incident in Gaza, and then he said to the people, the hundreds of thousands of demonstrators against him in Israel, Jewish demonstrators, he said, look, you have a choice. You either be patriotic and support the government that's protecting you from the real enemy, the Palestinians, or you continue with your demonstrations. And he got them to end the demonstrations that way. It was very effective. Of course, the reality is the Palestinians, overwhelmingly, the ordinary Palestinians and ordinary Jews, want the same thing, and would not be pitted against each other, except for the billionaires in Israel and the wealthy upper class in Palestine that goes along with it as well, by the way. Anyway, I'll post some stuff on this to read further at the bottom, and I hope that you will subscribe to my YouTube channel, and if you keep subscribing, I'll keep making more videos. Thank you.